If you have spent any time on social media in the last few days, you have probably seen people talking about Joni Mitchell, specifically her surprise appearance and performance on the weekend at the Newport Folk Festival. It made us think about a show we did in 2019, where we gathered together not only her biographer, but just people who love her music. We asked each of them to pick a specific song and talk about it while we shared the song with you. So even though we had other plans for today's show, we've decided this is the right time to remind you why so many people love so many different songs by the amazing artist Joni Mitchell. I hope you enjoy it after the news.
There was a moon and a street lamp. I didn't know I drank such a lot till I pissed a tequila and I gone to the full length of the parking lot. Oh, I talk too loose. Again, I talk too open and free. I pay a high price for my open talking like you do for your silent mystery. Come and talk to me. Please talk to me. Talk to me, Mr. Mystery. We could talk about Martha.
Probably one of my two favorite Joni Mitchell songs, but it's also the song we should open this show with today because that's what we're going to kind of do is get people to talk. So what's going to happen as we go along here is you're going to hear some people, some of them be people you know pretty well if you listen to the show a lot, but they've each picked a Joni Mitchell song they're going to talk about, and all the way through, David Yaffe and I are going to talk about it. David Yaffe, assistant professor of humanities at Syracuse University and the author most recently of Reckless Daughter, a portrait of Joni Mitchell. He's with us now. This is actually a song that is important. I mean, I guess you could sort of say all Joni Mitchell songs are essentially important to you, but it's actually one that you've focused on a bit too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
And there's so many things going on there. I mean, musically, part of the joke is that Jaco Pastorius's bass is really talking all the way through the song.
Yes, I mean, in that she wanted something contrapuntal, and she'd been looking for it from bass players ever since she started recording, and she was always frustrated. And when she first heard Jaco, she thought that she'd dreamed him up. She couldn't believe it. She was on a road trip in 1976, and that trip would be the place where she wrote most of the songs for Hejira. And she stopped by Robin Ford's place in Colorado, in Boulder, and Robin Ford had been he'd played on the Miles of Isles tour when he was quite young, and then he also played on Hissing of Summer Lawns, and then he played on the Hissing of Summer Lawns tour that got cut short after a couple of months, and so this was about a month after that happened, and she said, "Hey, I'm coming to Boulder," and he was like, "Great," and so she came over, and he had just picked up this album, Jaco Pastorius. Debut album, came out on Columbia Records. It was produced by Herbie Hancock, and yet the cultural share was so different in 1976. You could have this major album on a major label produced by Herbie Hancock with other famous musicians on it, and still not have heard of it. Until someone shares it with someone. And she heard Portrait of Tracy, and she thought, "Oh my God, I've got to dig this guy up." And at the time, he was playing bass with Phyllis Diller in Miami. She dug him up, and she brought him to the studio, and he played on 4 tracks.
He's and really, I mean, obviously this guy had something of a tragic arc, but he really is. Unlike there's no bass player who plays anything like him. So it's this marriage is a pretty amazing one. Now, one thing that I loved this song from the moment I heard it. And I have this feeling that I didn't hear it. Is it possible that there was a version of Miles of Isles that had this as a bonus tracker? I feel like I heard a live version of it before I ever heard.
You might have heard it on a bootleg.
Okay.
Because there were bootleg recordings from that Hissing of Summer Lawns tour, and that song was played on that tour.
Well,
And
wherever I heard it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And I've sort of gone through life just really loving it and thinking it's just a great song about a woman who can't get this mysterious, enigmatic, annoying guy to talk. Now, I didn't know it was about Bob Dylan. So tell us about that.
She told me that and then took it back.
Okay.
Which is in the spirit of the song, actually.
Right. Yeah.
So she said that she told me that to test me.
Mm-hmm. Maybe that's a good entree to just the difficulty of being Joni Mitchell's biographer, or it begins as the difficulty of being someone writing a magazine article about Joni Mitchell. You and I were chatting about this before we went on the air, but her first reaction to you writing about her was she never wanted to talk to you again.
Eventually, that was true.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked for about a year until she was done with me, and then I talked to everybody else, and then I got back in there, and she wanted to respond. She's very competitive, so she wanted to respond to everybody and what they said, because she wanted to one-up everybody's story, because she prided herself in having a better memory than everybody else. And so she, even though she didn't have such a great memory for names, she called me Jaffe. But anyway, so so she basically coughed up everything I needed for the book,
right? And
then she had an aneurysm.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to get to this a little bit later. I mean, but this whole time she's been dealing with health issues, including this thing Morgellon, which people are not even really sure exists, right?
That's right. It's not recognized by the AMA, but it's recognized by a community of people who share symptoms.
Yeah, and it's a thing. You feel like you have parasites under your skin or something? Yeah,
that's right. They experience itchiness, extreme itchiness, and then the things that spring up on their skin after they've scratched look like they came from another planet.
Yeah. So she's seems like in general her health's not good. We're never going to have another new Joni Mitchell album, I assume.
Probably not, although I guess you never know, because her recovery is certainly way beyond what anybody could have expected. It's amazing that she's even alive.
Yeah.
And so she could keep on. I mean, she's still in a wheelchair, although I think she can get along without one, but it's just for trip hazards that she's in a wheelchair.
I mean, I guess if we want another Joni Mitchell album, we just have to all keep claiming there won't be one, and then she'll get mad.
I mean, it's not out of the question. I mean, I doubt it, but it's not out of the question, because everything she did was implausible from the very beginning. It was implausible. And the doctors told her that she wouldn't walk after she had polio.
Mm-hmm. Which is it was just one implausible thing after the next. We should say she had childhood polio, and and it is actually one of the reasons, I guess, that she does these kind of peculiar tunings, right?
Oh, it's the entire reason why. It's the entire reason why. Because she has a weak left hand and a strong right hand.
Yeah.
And for some reason, you think about like Paul McCartney as a lefty, he just turned the thing upside down.
Right.
But her way was these open tunings. I mean, Eric Anderson showed her the open G, and she just went on from there. But what's very unusual about it is that even though she's not the first pop musician to use open tunings, nobody has been as elaborate with the open tunings as Joni. Like Keith Richards, for example. Don Everly showed Keith Richards the open G, and then he wrote all of the great riffs for the Stones in that open G. But that's all he learned was the one. Right. He doesn't have like 37 open tunings. No, she has like more than 60 of them. So I mean, nobody's done that. I mean, there's a guy named Michael Hedges maybe who has that many, but. Oh, yeah, I know who he is. So David Yaffe, or Jaffe, as the case may be, but we prefer Yaffe. David Yaffe, one of the things we thought would be fun for you, maybe a little bit different from some of the interviews you've done, is just like, you've done this incredible, well-researched, meticulously researched biography of who Joni Mitchell is. But, of course, the other side of that is who everybody else is who's been consuming Joni Mitchell all this time. So we had a bunch of people come into the studio and just tell us a story about one song. So we're going to start with Taneisha Duggan. People hear her on our show a lot. She's a producing associate at Theater Works. Here's Taneisha.
When Charlie speaks of Lester, you know someone great has gone. The sweetest swinging music man had a Porky Pig hat on, a bright star in a dark age, when the bandstands had 1,000 ways of refusing a black man admission. Black musician in those days.
So this is Goodbye a Pork Pie Hat from the album Mingus, which was released in 1979. Mitchell at this point got moving pretty quickly, and she started to make some new decisions about what she wanted to do. Why did you pick this song?
So this song, for me, I think came to me at a time where I was really kind of deciding or understanding the kind of artist that I was going to be. I heard it when I was a student at the Academy, the Greater Hartford Academy of the Arts. I was in the jazz band at that point, and I was one of the soloists. And Diane Maurer.
What were you playing?
I was a singer.
You were singing.
Yeah.
Oh, so Diane Maurer was
Yeah.
Okay.
And Diane Maurer selected this song as a song for me to sing. And I didn't really know the song, but of course I knew Mingus and I knew Lester Young, and I had a lot of relationship with Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter because my dad listened to those records all the time.
And they're both playing right here.
Correct. Yeah. And so when Diane picked it and said, I want you to solo on it, I was like, okay, what is this song? So I listened to the original Mingus piece, which is an ode to Lester Young, and loved it. And then heard her sing it afterwards. And the lyrics, exactly.
Yeah.
Were magical and beautiful. And it created for me this conflict because I wasn't a singing major. You know, I didn't really intend to sing, but I sang this song. And Berklee College of Music started knocking on my door. And I thought, oh, maybe I meant to go a different path. And so this song for me is about discovery,
right,
about understanding.
It's about both you and Joni Mitchell stretching.
Exactly.
I mean, she's going in a place. No, people were uncomfortable with this album.
Yeah, it's totally free jazz.
Yeah, her fan base she was making it with Mingus. Mingus was a dying man at the time. He actually died before the total completion of the album. But she didn't cut any corners, you can tell. There's this decision that she's made to immerse herself. She worked with a lot of musicians who aren't even on the album before she got going on the album. So, yeah, you're saying this is about challenging, getting out of your own comfort zone, too.
Yeah, and she doesn't sound anything like herself.
Yeah.
The Joni Mitchell that we've come to know and love, right? Like, she's not the pop singer that we all call on when you hear this album and when you hear this song. And so the fact that she really sounds like a vocalist to me, and that's not to diminish the work that she's done that is so popular, but that you really get to see the reaches of what she can do with her voice and how she can storytell within it is impressive and exciting because, like you said, we hadn't seen it before then.
Well, Shorter is trying to make Reed's sound like the human voice, and she's trying to make her voice sound like Reed's too at times. And I mean, she'd done some Lambert Hendricks and Ross stuff before getting to this, but this is so much a different iteration. So that's great. I mean, it's just it's a nice your story and her story.
I mean, that's the point of music, right? That's the point of how we interface with art. That we find ourselves inside of it and learn something more through it. So I'm grateful to her and all the artists, really, Mingus and Lester Young, that sort of collided to make this piece of work happen.
All right. We're going to leave it right there. That's the perfect place to end that. Let's play it out a little bit.
And there's black babies dancing to
So, David Yaffe, the point of music and art, we find ourselves inside of it. I'm just going to ask you to react.
Amazing how there are just stories upon stories upon stories with that track.
Yeah.
That's the most famous song that Charles Mingus ever wrote. Charles Mingus, a great, great composer, one of the great composers of the 20th century, and one of the great bass players ever, and one of the great band leaders ever. And so a lot of his songs were based on stories. And that one was based on a story that he told Joni, that he visited Lester Young about 6 months before he died. So his wife had kicked him out of their house on Long Island, and so he got a place right at 52nd and Broadway so that he could just be right there where the clubs were. This was, late 50s. And so they're just staring out the window, and Stan Getz pulls in on this Cadillac, and Lester Young says, "Oh, he bought that Cadillac on the way I play. He bought that Cadillac on my sound."
Yeah.
Because Stan Getz was very Lester Young influenced, and so Charles Mingus has this story about this great dying man. Now he's the great dying man.
Mm-hmm.
And he's telling this story to Joni. And so first Joni was a little bit intimidated. And she said, why don't you get Jon Hendricks to write the lyrics? He's the greatest bebop lyricist. And he said, oh, I did. You want to hear it? So then he plays it for her. And then she said, oh, my God, it's so maudlin. He's like, I know. The whole thing is the poor black man this and the poor black man that. And so she starts by just remembering the conversation with Mingus. And that gives her the first couple of verses. But then she needs a third act. And she doesn't know what to do. And she's walking around very frustrated. She needs inspiration, right? So she's with Don Elias, who was her boyfriend at the time, great percussionist. They were in a relationship, and he played congas on Don Juan's Reckless Daughter, and then he played Kit on the Shadows and Light tour. And they walk into this bar uptown, and the sign outside says Charlie's, and then they walk in, and there's another sign, and it says Pork Pie Hat Bar.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything just came to her, I mean, what she wrote down in that final verse: "We came up from the subway from the music midnight maze with Charlie's bass and Lester's saxophone, taxi horns and brakes, and Charlie's down in Mexico with the healers, and the sidewalk leads him to two dancers. We're standing outside this black bar." She's telling the story.
Yeah.
That third verse is just like laying it out. Do you get the picture? And it was just, things came to Joni like that all the time, where an experience would just reach out to her and give her what she needed.
We're talking to David Yaffe. His book is Reckless Daughter, A Portrait of Joni Mitchell. So I want to do one more clip here before we go to our first break. And I did want to get one mischief maker. I wanted to get somebody who, most of the people, by the way, when people walked in here, when I first approached Taneisha Duggan, I didn't know whether she had a Joni Mitchell cut that she liked at all. I mean, it never occurred to me that she had this story of singing this particular song while she's trying to decide what to do with her life. And that's one of the surprises. I didn't pick anybody based on how much they know about Joni Mitchell or what I thought they knew about Joni Mitchell. So there's just full of surprises. So I did ask Brendan Sullivan. I guess I probably could have guessed that Brendan wasn't going to necessarily salute the Joni Mitchell flag. He's toured the world as a DJ. He's a producer and author of Rivington Was Ours, Lady Gaga, The Lower East Side, and The Prime of Our Lives. So let's hear what. If you really, really love Joni Mitchell, you might want to turn off the radio for 5 minutes, but you won't. It's not going to be that assaultive. All right, here we go. So Joni Mitchell isn't really exactly generationally right for you. You're more in a position where you can look at what Joni Mitchell is saying to other people.
Yes, Joni Mitchell is in that category that we call mom jams. There's nothing wrong with any of these songs. They're not particularly cool, I would say that. They're super enjoyable though. What I imagine with this cut specifically.
I am on a lonely road and I am traveling, 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 looking for something. What can it be? Oh, I hate you some, I hate you some, I love you some. Oh, I love you when I forget about me. I wanna be strong, I wanna live alone, I wanna belong to the living. Alive, alive, I wanna get up and drive, wanna wreck myself.
See, in All I Want, this is sort of like your mother's version of I Did It My Way. Or, two woods diverged in a wood, and I took the one that's traveled by, I took the one that's traveled by. It's this idea of this person forging their own path, doing it their own way. It's right there in the beginning. That's what people are mostly going to hear when they listen to this. Mm-hmm. And it's a driving song. It's a car song. It's you've just done errands or dropped the kids somewhere, whether your mother or anybody, But this is that is the hoof in this song. That's what's driving this song forward. Is you're doing it your own way. I was trying to figure out where this song came into my life, and I realized I had DJ'd a wedding in the Hamptons where this was the mother-son dance. So it is a cute one. Joni Mitchell is slightly older than some of her baby boomer audience would be. Mm-hmm. She is the older sister of boomers. She's born in 1943, so she's just on the curve of it. She sort of missed, maybe we'll get to Woodstock in a second, but she was not a anti-Vietnam. She was sort of in the Bob Hope camp of supporting the troops. She had said at the time of Woodstock that she stayed away from it, but that she had uncles who died in World War II. So that was what her generation was focused on when she thought of war and the troops and things like that. So all of her songs haven't aged. They haven't stayed cool throughout the ages, I would say. What I do like about Joni Mitchell, there is a cool punk rock element to hearing a song, and your immediate reaction isn't, wow, it's amazing that people can do this with music. You sort of have a moment where you think, I could do that. You could pick up a guitar and play a Joni Mitchell song. And not only that, this is an era of, we're on our way into having guitar gods and electric guitars and strumming. But if you're in college and, someone has a guitar and you go, oh, I'd love to, wouldn't it be fun to play guitar? And you're going to press your fingers down on steel strings. Your fingers are going to hurt the first day. You're going to go out of tune and you don't know how to tune it. There's all these things that are missing in a Joni Mitchell song. Most of these are played or at least composed on nylon strings, which are a little easier on the hands. The strings are a little farther apart on the instrument. These are things
and with no recognizable tuning, too.
Yes, by far.
That's the problem with trying to play a Joni Mitchell song is she wrote it so that she could play it and she could sing it. I think that they're not as transferable as, say, a Joan Baez song would be. And so I think another thing about Blue, as you're talking about this, and particularly talking about perhaps your mother's generation. So Blue is the album on which this particular song occurs. And it is, if you are driving around doing some errands and picking up kids at soccer and stuff like that, and that's where you've gotten to, I would imagine that that Blue and a song like this one would connect you pretty easily back to the person that you were when you were listening to that album.
Oh, that is so true. This is an album that stays right where you left it.
Yeah.
I would say few couples have, this is our song.
Yeah.
But plenty of people in their personal time would go, oh, yeah, I remember when I got this record, and I remember, being head over heels with this guy or girl in college. Mm-hmm. And you can go right back to that place without it being in car commercials and on the radio.
Right. All right. So we should say one other thing here, which is the point that you make about Patti Smith and Joni Mitchell.
Oh, yes. I think of Joni Mitchell as being a little bit ahead of the herd in terms of the music she was producing, but in a way that she was behind the culture. And then someone like Patti Smith would come along. She's a little bit too old for Woodstock. If you want to specifically talk about Woodstock.
Yeah, I do.
Joni Mitchell, who's probably the biggest song is Woodstock, right? And there's something how she's sort of cutely behind the times because Woodstock takes place in 1969, the year after the Summer of Love. And then the song Woodstock comes out, it's the first song of the 70s. But Joni Mitchell was so established at that point that her management team said, don't play. It's a waste of time to go, who cares about this festival on a farm in upstate New York? So she stayed behind to do the Dick Cavett show in New York City. So this entire Woodstock song, you have to imagine that it's the perspective of someone who just watched it happen on the TV news.
All right, that is the not necessarily terribly reverent Brendan Sullivan and David Yaffe. I'm sure you have a lot you want to say, but he's not wrong about the fact she didn't go to Woodstock.
Yes, but he's wrong about the reason.
Yeah.
She wanted to go to Woodstock. She hadn't done major television. It's not that she was a behind the times person. She would have had a prominent spot at Woodstock. David Geffen was with her in the airport, and they were looking at the screens, and they were seeing hippies and mud, and they were seeing that that Bethel, New York, was being declared a national disaster area, and at the time the second largest city in New York State. And he said, "Look, it's hippies in the mud. We can fly you in." Because Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young were flying in on a helicopter with Elliot Roberts, who was also Joni's manager. Mm-hmm. And she could have flown in with them and played. But Geffen believed that it was more important for her to do Dick Cavett, because she hadn't done major American television before. And her first two albums didn't sell very much, so she really needed the exposure, and so she goes back to the Sherry Netherland with David Geffen, and then watches it on TV like everyone else, and she's sad because she thinks, "Oh God, this is the greatest event of my generation, and I've missed it." And so she then wrote the song. Writing the song came out of the sadness for missing it.
Yeah, she
came close to.
Yeah, it was more of a dirge for her, I think. Right?
It was exactly a dirge, and but then she said that if she had gone, she wouldn't have written the song because she would have been caught up with the backstage egos, and it wouldn't have seemed like utopia. It seemed like utopia because it was from a distance. There's
an interesting artistic point in that, and we're going to take a little break. We'll come back. We have so much to talk about in so little time, and we have David Yaffe here, his book, A Reckless Daughter, A Portrait of Joni Mitchell. So we're going to find about 300 more stories, every bit as iconic as that.
I'm traveling in some vehicle. I'm sitting in some cafe. A defector from the petty boys that shall shut love away. There's comfort in melancholy when there's no to explain. It's just as natural as the weather in this moody sky today. In our possessive coupling, so much could not be expressed. So now I am returning to myself. These things that you and I suppressed, I see something of myself in everyone, just at this moment of the world. The snow gathers like bolts of lace, waltzing on a ballroom girl.
So to reestablish, in 2017, this wonderful book by David Yaffe came out, Reckless Daughter, A Portrait of Joni Mitchell. And I said, let's do a Joni Mitchell show. And then it just has taken a while to figure out exactly how to do it and who was going to produce it. And it turned out Jay Holt stepped forward. He said, I'm going to do this. And we had this plan. We'd have David on, but we'd also have people on just talking about songs so that David could listen to them and kind of react and maybe tell more of what he knows about any individual song. And it's always was very surprising, especially the songs people picked. I'm going to do another one. Just play this for David. This is Lee Newton. She's director of program promotion for Connecticut Public, where we all work. She's a freelance TV host and voiceover talent, and that's all I'm going to say. Before Lee says a word, besides just chuckling in the background, we're going to play the beginning of this song and then get Lee talking about it.
midday sidewalk traffic. Just when I think he's foolish and childish, and I want him to be manly, I catch my fool and my child needing love and understanding. What a strange, strange boy. He still lives with his family, even the war and the Navy.
Okay, from the album Hejira, Strange Boy. So Lee, tell us about this.
Well, I mean, there are lots of songs that I could choose as my all-time favorite Joni song, but this is the one that I keep trying to play for people because I love it. I mean, there's just something, it has this very sensual, languid quality to it. And it's an amazing song because she has such great visual imagery in the lyrics. I mean, she's famous for that anyway, but she's sort of fallen for this man-child, and she's frustrated with him because, on one hand, she kind of wants him to be her intellectual and artistic equal, and he's clearly not that, but she's physically drawn to him in so many ways, and it's a beautiful song about that kind of dichotomy, but it has some incredible lyrics where she draws together this image of them in a bed and breakfast in New England, and I love those lyrics so much.
Well, so we know a little bit about this too. So this is from the album Hejira.
Right.
It's about 1976, and she actually is traveling around, sometimes in disguise, with a wig and sunglasses, and she's also sometimes traveling with men. Her relationship with the drummer John Guerin is falling apart. She has an affair with Sam Shepard at one point. And that's probably the basis of the song Coyote. And this is a guy who, we are told anyway, was a flight attendant who was in his 30s and did live with his parents, as is said in the lyric.
Right, and somehow as she met him and she was having an affair with this young guy, and I don't know much more about him than that as well, but I know that they were in Maine at one point, and I think that is where she's conjuring up these images of them in what sounds like a really stodgy kind of bed and breakfast. And there are these lyrics, if you don't mind me reading them.
Go ahead.
Well, she talks about, 1,000 glass eyes were staring in a cellar full of antique dolls. Mm-hmm. And I found an old piano and sweet chords rose up in wax New England halls. So you get the idea of this, but then it continues with, while the boarders were snoring under crisp white sheets of curfew, we were newly lovers then. We were fire in the stiff blue-haired house rules. And I love that because it's sort of the perfect embodiment of fresh new love, and there's nothing better when there's constraints to that, when you're in the middle of something and it's kind of a secret and it's hidden. And I love it. A lot of the songs don't have much of a structure, a traditional song structure. There isn't that verse, chorus. It's all a lot of verses. But yeah, I mean, Jaco Pastorius does not play on this song, although he does play on so many of those songs. But it's all just about the mood, the atmosphere, this sort of searching, lonely quality to the whole record. And I think this song is a good example of that.
Lee Newton, beautifully put. We'll end it there.
1,000 glass eyes were staring in a cellar full of antique dolls. I found an old piano, and sweet chords rose up in wax New England halls. While the boarders were snoring under crisp.
So, David, so much to say here. I guess one of the places that I want to start here is there's so many moments in her career where it seems that as though she, more than most artists that I can think of, decides that in order to grow, she essentially has to burn down her musical past a little bit. There's no way you can make Hejira if you're attached to the person you were on For the Roses or something. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, Dylan said he who is not busy being born is busy dying, and he did the same thing. And one thing about it is that her voice changed even between Court and Spark and Hejira. It becomes a lot huskier and heavier because she had a 4-pack habit of cigarettes. And so that prematurely aged her voice. But it also meant that she just didn't sound like that person on those earlier records already. And but then she just kept on changing. Her social life changed. Her crowd changed. I remember Crosby was telling me that like when he went to see her and the concert that was recorded for the Shadows and Light live album for 1979, that he hadn't seen her in years. Because her crowd changed, and he called it an art crowd. She was hanging with an art crowd, and so just, she did keep changing, and I think at her most vital was when you're catching her at these moments of transformation, and then I just think when I hear it, oh my God, thank God they got this on tape.
Right. And I think
Thank
also...
God they got this on tape.
Yeah. One of the things she's not afraid to do is to not like the way that popular music sounds. So, at a certain point, she just didn't like the way bass sounded and drums sounded on all the other incredibly popular, more or less pure, composed popular music of the time. She just didn't like it. And that's sort of... She comes back to that a lot. There's a point in your book where this is much further in the future. There's a 1990 charity concert celebrating the fall of the Berlin Wall, and she's surrounded by the great rock stars of her time. And what? She just decided she just doesn't like any of this, right?
Right. That's right. I mean, everybody was acting weird, or at least she thought that everybody was acting weird. She just thought that nobody had any manners.
Right. It's Cyndi Lauper and Bryan Adams and I think Sinead O'Connor. And she just like, who are these people?
I mean, Sinead O'Connor actually worshipped her, but she did it in a weird way.
Yeah.
And she said in an interview, Joni said in an interview, "Oh, I like Sinead. She's a passionate little singer."
Right.
But Joni had a very specific idea about what she wanted records to sound like. And I mean, and this is really part of genius. When she has the specific idea of something that doesn't exist yet, and she thinks, I want it to be that.
Right.
And I reject anything that fails to be that, or I will tolerate this thing that fails to be that, but really I'm not going to quit until I get exactly what I want it to sound like. I'm not going to make any compromises, which is very hard to do when you're making a record. And that's why she had no producer credit for the first 10 albums, except for David Crosby. She had David Crosby, and then the 9 albums that came after that had no producer credit. And because when in fact Henry Louis, her engineer, really was a producer, but she just didn't want him getting the title producer.
But I think also, maybe it is her and Dylan. Almost everybody who's any good and who has any success is somewhat attached to the thing that they did that was successful and made them popular. And there's sort of no way in the world that James Taylor doesn't like Sweet Baby James or Fire and Rain or something. I mean, and these are unusual people. I mean, you can't make Hejira, and God knows you can't make Mingus unless you are prepared basically to sever ties with all of the things that have contributed so far to your success.
Oh, yeah, and because you're not the same person you were 5 minutes ago, or the person that you'll be in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
that's why it's incredible. They caught it on tape. Incredible.
Yeah,
they caught this moving target on tape. Amazing, and she was astounding over and over again.
All right, we've got time for one more segment here, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna play a song out of this segment, and then when David and I come back, David's gonna talk about it. So I want you to listen a little bit more carefully than you usually do to bumper music.
The able-bodied have shipped away. Lay down your arms. Molly McGee gets her tea leaves read. You'll be married in a month, they say. Lay down your arms. These leaves are crazy. Look at this town, there's no men left. Lay down your arms. Just frail old boys and babies talking to teachers in the treble study one. She plants her garden in the spring. Lay down your arms. Study one no more. She does the winter shoveling. Lay down now. Study one no more.
Today's show is produced by Jay Holt and me, Chion Wolf, with big help from Betsy Kaplan. Our intern is Seth Blair, and the part of Bill Curry was played by Leonard Cohen, David Crosby, Graham Nash, James Taylor, Jackson Brown, and Sam Shepard. And now, back to Colin.
All right, so we're back. We're back with David Yaffe. He is visiting us today to talk about Joni Mitchell, and we were talking about Joni Mitchell with a bunch of our friends, too. And so I asked everybody to listen carefully as we were playing Out of the Bee. That's from the album, from Joni's album, Chalk Mark, In a Rainstorm. It's called Tea Leaf Prophecy. So tell us about this.
Well, that song was originally recorded for that album, Chalk Mark in a Rainstorm, 1988. But Joni re-recorded it, and it turned out that it was the last thing she ever recorded. Mm-hmm. Her ex-husband, Larry Klein, was producing this album for Herbie Hancock called River, the Joni Letters, which was an album of Joni Mitchell songs recorded by Herbie. And Joni and Herbie were close. And so it was Klein's idea to choose this song because Joni's mother had just died, and the song was about her mother. Mm. And so on the 1988 version, she says Molly McGee, but when she re-records it with Herbie Hancock in 2007, she says Myrtle McKee, which is her mother's maiden name. Mm. And it's just incredible that this whole song about destiny and the unlikeliness of all of these magical things happening and these implausible things happening would be the last thing that she would ever record. And so it's also very funny in some places. It's a dark song, but there's one line in it that always makes me laugh, which is that she finds, she goes to get her tea leaves read, and then the tea leaves say you'll be married in a month. And then she says, these leaves are crazy. I think that's a great line.
She's a very funny person, and yeah. I think maybe that's not always entirely clear, although if we'd played the opening song, Talk to Me a little bit deeper, at one point she actually imitates a chicken,
She does. Chicken squawking.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good chicken, too. She does a pretty good chicken.
But it's incredible because you've got like this drudgery of domestic life, Mm-hmm. She plants her garden in the spring. She does the winter shoveling. Tokyo Rose on the radio. She says she's leaving, but she don't go. Mm-hmm. And so Joni was the one that was able to break out of all that, and break out of Saskatoon, right, and do something that nobody could have dreamed of, and be something that nobody could have dreamed of, including Joni herself.
Yeah, I think that's sort of, it goes back to what we were saying about all these different phases of her music, which involve burning down the past or just completely violating whatever set of boundaries exist that circumscribe her and define her. And she kind of did that with her life, too. A lot of other people, with the kind of experience she had with polio, with being brought up in a certain kind of family without really having necessarily exposure to all kinds of culture. Every single time she just said, screw that you are not going to hold me in this pen.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so she, this other thing, sleep little darling, this is your happy home. Hiroshima cannot be pardoned. Don't have kids when you get grown, because this world is shattered. The wise are mourning, the fools are joking. Oh, what does it matter? The wash needs ironing and the fire needs stoking. Don't have kids when you get grown was something that Myrtle would say to Joni a lot, as meaning that she was a pain in the ass. Right. But then she adds, this world is shattered. And that's not Joni's mother. That's Joni. This world is shattered is Joni. But then you get back to the chores. You get back to the drudgery of domestic life. And by the way, Joni saw that there was an honor to it, even though she didn't choose, she got to be beyond it. But she, she has a song on Hey Jira called Song for Sharon that's about wondering what would have happened if she'd gone the path of a normal person. Mm-hmm.
I just, before we run out of time, too, one thing I just want to talk quickly about, because I'm also very interested in how people kind of use music and interact with music and stuff like that. I feel like there's a lot of people who stopped somewhere, there are a lot of people who stopped, maybe they stopped after Hijira. Maybe it's hard to tell. But, it might be just worth it for you to just say a word or two about some of the joys that you can discover in the later part of the Joni canon.
Absolutely. There is a kind of a snobbery about like a rock critic's eye view of Joni, and I think that I was guilty of that myself when I was younger, before I wrote this book, where I thought, wow, the first 10 albums are incredible, and then after that it's so disappointing. And I don't feel that way anymore, even though there's nothing like Jocko. I mean, there's certain things that you just can't recreate. But the things that she did do as an older writer were just astonishing, and they were astonishing in a different way. And then when you hear her voice become more ravaged, she uses that to such great dramatic effect. And sometimes you're feeling ravaged, and you want succor from something that will give that to you. You don't necessarily want to hear the ingenue.
Right.
You want to hear Billie Holiday on Lady in Satin. That does something for you. Or, Edith Piaf, or on, right? Mm-hmm. And, or later Dylan, for that matter, does that for you.
I also think like Night Ride Home is an amazing album that competes very easily with the early canon. I mean, just the songwriting all the way through it is incredible, and people don't know that album.
If we call late Joni, like from Wild Things Run Fast onward, I think probably Night Ride Home has the most great songs on it.
Yeah,
because you've got Coming from the Cold, and you've got Two Gray Rooms, and you've got Nothing Can Be Done. I mean, right now, like I'm the age that Joni was when she cut that, and so when she says, I am not old, I'm told, but I am not young, and nothing can be done. My heart is like a smoking gun, and nothing can be done. Mm-hmm. That's your mid-40s right there. And so, by the way, whoever that fellow was who talked about mom rock, I mean, well, some people are moms and they still have souls, and they still love music. Sorry.
Also on that album, I mean, if you just want to have some fun, I mean, Ray's Dad's Cadillac is,
Yeah, sure. I mean, things like that are, and I mean, that's a quality that you're not used to from a Joni Mitchell song, and it's a great memory song, And then the next album, Turbulent Indigo, you get one of my very favorite Joni Mitchell songs, the title track about Van Gogh. It's an incredible song. Sex Kills is amazing, and then on the next album, Taming the Tiger, you get Man from Mars, which is amazing. So I mean, you've got these great songs.
Harlem and Havana is a pretty cool song too. Actually,
it's very cool. Yeah. Great Wayne Shorter. Wayne Shorter, by the way, is on 10 Joni Mitchell albums.
That's amazing too. Yeah,
starting with Don Juan's Reckless Daughter, he's on 10 albums.
Well, David Yaffe, first of all, we want everybody to see, really, seriously, at the end of the show, seek those things out. Get on your Spotify or whatever it is that you do. But don't use it the way you usually use Spotify. You really have to kind of immerse yourself and dig a little deeper. But a lot of these later albums are really worth it. We've been talking to David Yaffe, assistant professor of humanities at Syracuse University, author, most recently, Reckless Daughter, a portrait of Joni Mitchell. We just thought we would sort of end. There's some really, 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 really great covers of Joni Mitchell. But I'm not sure there's anything quite as amazing as this. And I don't even have to tell you who this is.
So sweet, I could drink a case of you, darling, oh yeah, and I still be on my feet, I still be on my feet.